I'm Caitlin Matson, and this is the Green Room. Joining me today is Maestro Daniel Hege from the Wichita Symphony Orchestra. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Caitlin. Hello, everyone.
So wonderful to have you on, as always. And you are preparing for your final Masterworks concert of the season.
That's right. We've got a fantastic program to close the season, starting with Mozart Piano Concerto number 23 in A major, K488, with Terence Wilson, who's a big star in the piano world. And then we conclude the concert with Mahler's First Symphony, which is one of the greatest first symphonies ever written.
It's such a wonderful program, two
It,
masters, and the Mahler, we think of Mahler, we think of large.
yes.
Large in number, large in scale, large in sound. Do you have more musicians on stage than usual for the Mahler?
Yes. Yes, in fact, the Mahler First Symphony, Gustav Mahler's First Symphony, that will perform on Saturday, uh, will be the largest orchestra of the season. And we will hear so many different colors and different sounds. So just the sonic volume and the range of dynamics that you will hear on that concert are going to be astonishing. Mahler is also known for his great chamber music that he creates with sometimes just two or three people on the entire stage of maybe 100 people sitting there. And then, of course, his huge fanfare, brass fanfare is full with percussion, strings, and woodwinds as well. So you really hear a wide range of expression in Mahler's music.
Can you give us an example of, one of your sections, maybe the horns, brass, how many would typically be in the section for a symphony concert and how many are going to be there for the Mahler?
Yeah. So for a standard, let's say a Beethoven symphony, you would have, in most cases, only two horns. In the Ninth Symphony, you have four horns plus an assistant. By the time we get to Mahler, he's written for seven horns, and so we'll have eight horns back there because we'll have seven horns that it's written for plus an assistant. We usually have three trumpets. In this case, Mahler wrote for four trumpets and then adds a fifth trumpet for the last movement. Normally three trombones, but he actually writes for a fourth trombone in the last movement, plus tuba, large battery percussion, and the woodwinds go into quadruples at some points.
Oh my goodness.
And typically, let's say, going back to Beethoven as kind of the spine of his of the orchestral repertoire, his symphonies, you would see pairs of woodwinds. So two flutes, two oboes, two clarinets, two bassoons, two horns, two trumpets. So you can see how much more massive and muscular this work is with Mahler's music. But I do want to emphasize that he really doesn't just go for the bombast all the time. He goes for incredibly intimate, quiet moments and reflective moments as well. It was actually Mahler who coined this phrase: a symphony must be like the world. It must contain everything. And that's what you feel like Mahler is doing with each of his nine symphonies, nine completed symphonies, plus Das Lied von der Erde and the Adagio from the 10th Symphony. You feel like he's trying to incorporate all of human existence into a symphony. The first symphony has so much imagery. For example, the very beginning does not start off bombastically at all. It starts off with the sound of dawn, like we're coming out of a dark, deep sleep, and we're just hearing the beginnings, not only of just birds and things like that, but we're actually the feeling of the morning, like dew, dew on the grass. Did anyone think that ever sounded like anything? It
Mm.
sounds like the beginning of this symphony, like just that moment where it's right before dawn. You can actually hear it in the music, and it's very mystical and very strange and very beautiful. And then you start to hear these themes just trying to find their way. And then he ends up using a lot of material that he had written before on art songs. So he uses some of those melodies in the first movement. And then the first movement gets very dramatic and swept up. The second movement is a very Viennese or Austrian Ländler, which is kind of like a waltz, but like a countryside type of waltz. And it's very hearty with a lot of gusto and has a beautiful contrasting trio section. And then it comes back. And then the third movement of the Mahler Symphony is very interesting. It's like an imagined funeral for forest creatures. And so all these little, he had such an imagination. And it's to the tune of a minor version of Frere Jacques, the popular children's tune that we all know. And it starts off with principal bass playing the solo. So Mark Foley will be playing that solo at the very beginning. And then each of the instruments, many of the instruments will take that tune up. And then it's contrasted with klezmer music. He just tries to put everything into the symphony. And then the last movement is by far the most dramatic and violent, but at the end, extremely triumphant. And if you want to look for something theatrical, the whole wall of horns that we have in the back will be standing because Mahler says, stand up at the end of the symphony, towards the end. And they all stand together and they play the theme in a very jubilant and very triumphant way.
Yeah, it really does have the world in it. A little bit of everything and the kitchen sink.
It really does.
So
And
satisfying.
he did that with all of his symphonies, but he covers the whole array of emotions so that you go into those melancholy, sometimes a little bit dark places, but then he always tries to turn it around. And another thing that's interesting about Mahler's music is that and people talked about him being this way, that when he would be walking down the street, suddenly he would just immediately turn directions or start walking very fast or very slow, just on a dime. And that's sometimes how his music is. Like you're going along in this beautiful melody and it seems almost predictable where it's going or inevitable. And then all of a sudden it just flies. So the tempo just changes immediately in the middle of it. And that's how it seems as though sometimes Mahler's music is. And yet he is a master at weaving the form together. So it has this feeling of both fantasy and incredible Germanic structure within that entire symphony.
Mozart and Mahler is Saturday, April the 13th in Century 2 Concert Hall. It starts at 7:30. At 6:30, there is a concert talk beforehand. Uh, for tickets, go to wichitasymphony.org. It's a wonderful place to go for tickets. Not only you can get your ticket for next weekend, but you can look at tickets for next season because you've
Yes.
announced your season, and that all that information is on there as well. You can also call the box office at 316-267-7658. We're going to listen to the last movement of this Mozart Piano Concerto number 23, is it?
Yes.
And we'll be back and we'll kind of dive into that piece and talk more about your guest soloist. We'll be
Yes.
right back with Maestro Daniel Hege. That is the finale of Mozart's 23rd Piano Concerto, which is on the program, the final masterworks concert of the Wichita Symphony's season. And it features pianist Terrence Wilson. I'm Caitlin. This is the Green Room with Maestro Daniel Hege. Well, would you inform us a bit? I think it's difficult sometimes for us to remember the difference between a piano concerto when there are so many that have been composed by one composer, or the differences. What should we be listening to? Why is this piano concerto? What is it? What makes it unique? Can you enlighten us a little bit about Mozart's 23rd
Mhm.
piano concerto?
Sure. First of all, a lot of these names of the pieces, he wrote 27 piano concertos total, which is a huge amount. And of course, he wrote 41 symphonies. So volume was really something he was very good at. And of course, the highest quality. Uh, these don't have particular subtitles to them. So to say number 23 doesn't mean particularly anything, or to say Kerschel number 488, which is sometimes how it's referred to as well, doesn't either. The piece is in A major, and it's one of the few piano concertos where he has a slow movement that's in a minor key. Something else that's interesting about this particular concerto is that it is a very, very small instrumentation. I was talking about the Beethoven instrumentation as having pairs of woodwinds and two horns and trumpets and so on. This Mozart piano concerto, many of them have trumpets and timpani with them. This one has only one flute, no oboes, which is also
Hmm.
unusual, two clarinets, two bassoons, two horns. That's it, of course, plus strings, but no timpani, no trumpets, no oboes, only one flute. So it's a very, very compact orchestra. And that was chosen on purpose to go with the Mahler, which is going to be the largest orchestra of the season. So when I think for the listener, it's a huge treat to come in and hear something with such clear, beautiful Mozartian textures that are just so classical and just clear to the ear, and then come out on the second half and have this smorgasbord, of amazing palettes of color.
Yes,
Uh,
it does. It does scratch both sides of your brain almost. It's
yes,
almost like Mozart scratching the left side of your brain and Mahler the right. Something
yeah,
about Mozart, the clarity, the precision, it's mathematical.
it
Um,
is.
yes,
It,
and it
it,
goes where you want it to go.
It does. It goes where you want it to go, and yet it's not predictable. He keeps throwing little curves in there, and that's the thing about Mozart is that it sounds like it's inevitable what he wrote, that's the way, that's the only way that it could be. And yet, if someone sat down and said, okay, I'll compose the next bar, like they only had so many bars of Mozart, so many measures, and then they had to continue it on, there's no way they could do it. Even if they had all the information from before, that's how clever he is. He's so good at it that it sounds like it could, like, oh, I could do some of that if I knew some of that. No,
Yeah.
it's really impossible. Um, the first movement is very elegant and beautiful, just a sweep with all of the gorgeous melodies. The second movement is quite melancholy and starts off with only piano. The piano plays a solo all by himself, in this case with Terence Wilson playing it. And then the rest of the orchestra comes in. I think it's one of the most poignant, one of the most touching, and one of the most gorgeous second movements Mozart ever wrote. And then it couldn't go, and it goes as far to the other side of that emotion with the third movement that we just heard, that very high spirited
Yeah.
kind of rollicking gaiety, that just takes off with the virtuosity. And we're very fortunate to have Terence Wilson with us, someone I have worked with for about 20 years.
Really.
He's a fabulous pianist, and he can do everything. And we've done Rachmaninoff and Gershwin and Tchaikovsky and all these big works.
I was
But
looking at a
really,
schedule and it was it was just everything,
he's got a
every 3 weeks, a new city, a completely different concerto.
he has a huge repertoire, and so I'm really excited to hear him play the Mozart because I think he has that beautiful finesse and touch that I think is so important in Mozart's music.
Terrence Wilson joins the Wichita Symphony Orchestra next Saturday at 7:30. That's April the 13th, the final Masterworks concert of the season. Next season has been announced. You can buy those season tickets on the website, wichitasymphony.org. Or I think you can mix and match, pick what you like, but you can go there and look what is coming up, what they have in store for us next year. There are also other things in the works. The annual Symphony in the Gardens of Botanica
Yes,
is happening again this year as well. And information
is
is out
also on
about
the
that.
website. Yeah, in May 17th. So you don't want to miss that. That is a spectacular program that we have out there, and in combination with Botanica. Uh, but you don't want to miss this last Masterworks of the season
No,
on
but
April 14th.
Mahler, and yeah,
Mahler,
get both sides of your brain
you,
scratched.
and this symphony clocks in at maybe about 56 minutes, the Mahler First Symphony, which, yeah, some people say, oh, that's so long, but it's only maybe about 10 minutes longer than a Brahms symphony. It won't feel long because the piece is so epic and it is so variable all the way through. It has just so much variety and different sounds and gorgeous melodies. I think you'll just be swept away.
WichitaSymphony.org. Their box office is 316-267-7658. Thank you, Daniel, for being here and shedding some light on Mozart and Mahler.
Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin. We'll see you all soon.